It's my pleasure now to yield the floor to the CEO of the Tourism Business Council of South Africa, to give him the opportunity to share some of the highlights that the organization has had, including giving us some key updates on matters that are of importance, and potentially also giving us a little bit of feedback on some of the workshop sessions that were taking place yesterday, and making sure that those sessions fit into the arc of conversation that we've been having today. Might I ask you to please help me welcome Mr. Tshifhiwa Tshivhengwa to the stage, please.
Every year, we always talk about what we've been up to, because we don't want the conference to be a talk shop where we come and talk and we get excited and we drink wines and beers, we go to the Valley of Waves or the Shebeen, and wherever, we go inside the Sun City Resort. So I think it's very important that we always are accountable, and we always come back and say, this is what we said we're going to do, and whether we did it or not, and there has to be accountability. And I will also give feedback from the marketing session that we had yesterday in terms of what we're going to do going forward. But I must say, it's been a busy year so far. Who knows what's going to happen next? 4 years ago, this is the slide that I shared 4 years ago when we had this conference for the first time. And we were coming out of the pandemic, and we needed to redefine and recalculate the targets that we set for ourselves in 2018. So let me go back. Gillian is here. She was there when we did this. In 2018, we sat down through what we call the PPGI process, the Public-Private Growth Initiative. And it was different sectors that were sitting there. And we said, how do we grow the economy of this country? And each sector had to come up with a plan on how to grow the economy of this country. And part of that plan was to say we need to grow the economy by 6% if we want to see employment rising, and of course unemployment going down. So that was very important. And then we sat down and we said we need to crunch some numbers that are tourism related, and we need to have a target. And we sat down, this was in 2018, and we came up with the famous 21 million tourists by 2030, right? And we said we're going to add 2 million jobs into the tourism economy. And we did a whole thing around where those numbers are going to come from. In the main, it was to ensure that the markets that we have, which we call the defend markets. These are the traditional markets that sends tourists to South Africa, which is the North American market, UK, Ireland, German market, or the German-speaking markets, Southern Europe, and so forth and so on. But we also moved to Asia. We said growth is most likely going to come from Asia, India and China being key on the basis that the middle class is growing in those countries, and they are emerging economies. And China is now one of the superpowers. And we said we need to do more at those particular markets. And after we put together this strategy, we came up with these 10 points. That in order for us to achieve the 21 million tourists, we need to do these 10 things, which I'm going to revisit today. 2019, we had pandemic. We all know what happened. We went to 2019, it was late 2019. That means 2020 we were out. Part of 2021 we were out. We had to rework the numbers. And when we reworked the numbers, the interesting part is that we asked South African tourism to rework the numbers. We went and reworked the numbers independently. We all came to a number of 15.6 million tourists, independently, which meant that, we were not mad. And when we came back with the 15.6 million tourists, we said, well, the things that we used to have as issues are still there, and we still need to work on them. And then we had the first conference. When we had the first conference, we talked about this. And I'm going to report on this because we still need to report on things until they get done. Now, today we had very good speakers to talk about various things. We had the minister who spoke about various things that are happening from G20, the investment, G20 Investment Summit, the ministerial meetings that were held, the adoption of, the G20, the tourism stance on the G20, which the president of the country will take forward. And we had the Minister of Home Affairs to talk about many things that we spoke about as far back, and Gillian was reminding me, as far back as 2015, when we were dealing with issues of unabridged birth certificates, which we were able to solve sometime in 2018, when we went to NEDLAC and we met with the president of the country, and we asked the president to remove that requirement for children that are traveling into the country. And that was done. And much of the fight was handled through SATSA, and David, unfortunately, is not here. He had to leave. He handled that discussion and that fight to the point when we took it over. We went to NEDLAC. I just started then at TBCSA, and we were able to solve that issue then, sometime in 2018. So fast forward, let's talk about these things that are here. The first thing that we felt was very important when we did the strategy was to say, we need a really fully automated, world-class e-visa with improved airport e-infrastructure. What have we done there? So since then, we've engaged with Home Affairs. In the past, even in 2018, it was very difficult to engage with Home Affairs. But there was a time, sometime in 2020, 2021, where we started to engage meaningfully with Home Affairs. When we got the unabridged birth certificate to be removed, we started to advocate, number one, for New Zealand to be removed from countries that required visa. We're all going to remember that there was a time when South African didn't need visa to go to New Zealand. And New Zealand, because of few people who went there, they never returned or something, then they imposed visa to South Africa. And then we went back and we said, no, you're imposing visa to us, we're going to impose visa to you. We calculate the economic impact and we went and presented. And we were successful in making sure that we reversed that decision. And then the next thing, we said, we've got to introduce some sort of e-visa. And I remember going to the offices of Home Affairs then, and they showed us an e-visa. We came back, we were very mad. We were not happy about it. The reason is because it was not an e-visa. It was a simplification or the digitization of a paper-based system into online, but it didn't have any risk engine on it. We talked about it and talked about it. We said, we've got to do more. Then the e-visa was slightly improved, and it was implemented in even more markets. Some of those are Eastern European countries that, are part of the European Union, but otherwise, if they want to come to South Africa, they still require a visa. I don't know why. But even today, it's still so. So we improved it. It made things better. Then we went and we said, what about China and India? We're struggling. And if we're going to get big growth from China and India, we've got to do something about those two countries. And then we funded a study a year ago. And we said, can we have a study that deals with how to solve issues in China and India? And through the study that we funded as the TBCSA, we then came to a conclusion that we can have the TTOS program, which is the Trusted to Operator Scheme, which is in place as we speak. And then we went further in that study and say, what about something that could be better? We started to talk about ETA, of which I'm happy the minister have announced that we're going to be implementing ETA. And that's what we did with issue number 1 about e-visa and improved e-infrastructure at the airports. We have not done much about the improvement of e-infrastructure at the airport. It's something that is ongoing. It's going to take a bit of time. We also want to be like Al mentioned when he arrived, at LAX. We just want to walk through. The camera should recognize us and say, hey, here is this vendor boy. We know he comes from vendor. Let him in, he's from here. We also want that. So that part we still need to work on. And all the players that we need to get into the room needs to still work on. And the airport, infrastructure is still, an issue. George is here from Board of Airline Representative. He can speak to the issues that they have at the airports and the infrastructure improvement that needs to happen. Sandele is here from the Car Rental Association. Lots of car rental companies park their cars at the airports. There's a need for infrastructure. But we've made some big movement on issue number 1. And I think that all those that have worked on that, we can simply say that we are almost there. But we are not there yet. But we've made some huge and significant movements when it comes to the issues of e-visa. The lobbying efforts, the patience and everything else should pay off. Now that we've opened up that issue number 1, and it's also going to link to other issues that are here. We spoke about waiving, number 2, waive visa for more source markets. Now, this is an issue that's very difficult to navigate. And the reason for it to be difficult is because there's a lot of people or a lot of departments that are involved in making a decision for a visa waiver. There's a state security that's involved in addition to Home Affairs and many others. Now, we did have some few countries that we recommended. Part of those countries are Eastern European countries that used to be part of the Soviet Union. Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, those countries that are part of, European Union. That we said, let's have some visa waivers, because it doesn't make sense that they carry the European Union passports. They can travel in Europe freely, and everybody else in Europe can come to South Africa without a visa. It's okay, but not them. We spoke about certain African countries. We spoke about Kenya. We spoke about Ghana. We attempted to talk about Nigeria. And few others. We talk about Uganda, I think, in part of our discussions. Well, in some of those cases, we did get good answers. If you look at the arrivals from Kenya since the visa waiver, you can see that the numbers have grown by huge digits. We are more than 100% of what we used to do. That's from Kenya. That means that instead of Kenyans, going somewhere else to shop, they now can come to South Africa. And watch out for the numbers from Ghana, because we've got a visa waiver now with Ghana. The numbers are going to start to shoot up. Imagine if we adopt the same principles in some of the markets that we believe are critical. China and India is critical. And if we're saying that our growth is going to come from China and India, I think visa waivers for those two markets may be the catalyst for job creation within the tourism space. The third thing that we spoke about was the critical skills visa and temporary work visas. Now, let me talk about the temporary work visa. The temporary work visa, partly, we've covered it maybe in the digital nomad space. But we were late, because when other countries were introducing digital nomads during COVID, we were busy trying to think whether we should do it or not. We eventually did it. We put a whole lot of thresholds into it. It's very difficult for people to get. So, partly done, partly not. But there's another work visa that we wanted. We have said that there's a shortage of skills that are related to languages. The German-speaking tour guides, Italian, and many others, the skills that we have, has aged. So what do we then do? We need tour guides that speaks German. We need to source so that we can fix the situation. Yes, there has been programs that have been implemented through the department for language training. But it's different when you have someone who speaks the language that will make the trip memorable to someone who's trying to speak the language. You see, it's like me not speaking Venda. You see, when I'm speaking English, I'm giving you half. Because my bundles for English are not, If I start speaking in Venda, I would have been done by now. So issues of critical skills, visas, and working visas, I think it's very important. We still have to work more on that. I don't think we've done enough to get to where we need to be. Number 4, the issues of NPTR, which has to do with vehicle licensing, where we said we need to reduce or fix the red tape. This issue has been with us for quite a number of years. And there are people who are sitting here today that still have licenses that are not issued for probably more than a year, if not more. It's a big problem. We have people who bought vehicles hoping that they will get licenses, and they had to return those vehicles or had to sell those vehicles. So this is a big, big problem. We have tried through the presidential red tape reduction team to fix this issue. I remember there was a time when safety went to Durban to try to negotiate this thing when we were trying to fix it in various ways. We had several meetings with the Department of Transport trying to fix this matter. And we had meetings with our own minister to try to fix this matter. We have escalated this matter now to the presidency. Again, I remember in 2018, I was at the president's residence, and there was a few of us who were talking, and I raised this issue. Before Minister Ramokgopa became the Minister of Electricity, he was at the office of the president, and I said, why can't we fix this thing? And there was a commitment to fixing it through the red tape reduction team, but that was taking longer. So we've taken this matter to recall the Project Vulindlela, where in the presidency there's a project management team that's working on this matter. So in order for us to fix this, we've put money into it. Because I don't want to be reporting on this next year. I want to say, tick, it's done. We've put money into it. We're doing a study to make sure that we come up with a better regulation and a better outcome for NPTR and fix it once and for all. And perhaps from the policy point of view, we need to think of whether we want the Department of Transport to be issuing tour operator licenses, or do we want the Department of Tourism to be doing that? Or another entity that would be efficient to do it. We've got to decide on that from the policy point of view. so that there can be a shift. Yes, the Department of Transport can give us the licenses, they can give us the roadworthy certificate, and that's about it. Then we take over from the Department of Tourism and we issue the permits so that we don't have too many certificates that needs to be issued by one entity that has been struggling to issue but one. And for me, that's fundamental. And it's something that we've got to decide how we want to handle this on our own from the Department of Tourism point of view. I'm not saying let's take the responsibility of Department of Transport. I'm saying they need to start and end somewhere, and we need to take over certain functions. We have done this successfully. If you look into Kruger National Park, the OSVs, who does the licensing of OSVs? It's a self-regulated mechanism that is used to do the licensing of OSVs. So we've got to look at this and say, how do we apply it in our space? Of course, this is a very much contested space. I know there are, Santaco is here. It's a space where they're working very, very well. So it's something that we need to look at as we go. But we have put money into it. We should be able to solve it. I'm hoping that next year, that issue will be done. Number 5, tourism safety. We've spoken about tourism safety, and many speakers touched on it. You can never have a thriving tourism when safety of tourists is compromised. So that's very important. And the safety of tourists is also dependent on the safety of South Africans. You can't have a green route for tourists or a safe route for tourists and every other route for all of us is less safer than the one for tourists. It may not be sustainable. However, we know that we are limited in what we can do. So what have we done about that? Since 4 years ago, we've funded several projects through the TOMSA levy that has to do with safety. The first project that we funded was the Numbi Gate project in Mpumalanga, where the German tourist was shot and killed, and there had been many incidents that were happening, and we decided that we need to do something about it. And we did do something about it, and we've spent a considerable amount of money over the past few years to make sure that that route is safe. What's interesting is that that route was not only safe for tourists, it became safe for communities. People were able to walk up and down, and they were able to trade without fear. So the biggest benefit potentially has been to the community. When you have safe routes, everything else starts to mushroom. Small businesses start to mushroom. People start to feel comfortable. Girls are able to walk without being harassed. There are other projects that we also have it backed on. We have projects that have been approved that has to do with the Durban waterfront, or the beach, not the waterfront. So we want to make sure that the Durban beach is safe. So there are some resources that we're going to be putting there. For far too long, there's been too many things that have been happening there. And we believe that that beach is beautiful, and it should be utilized, and we've got lots of infrastructures there, and we need to make sure that it's safe. We also know that at the Broadwalk in Port Elizabeth, there's been far too many incidents that have happened there. There at Nelson Mandela Bay. We met with the hoteliers there and the business people there, and we put some money into there. We are busy working on a project there to make sure that it is safe. We also engaged, there was a situations, when you drive to Ado Elephant Park, when you pass Motherwell area, there's been way too many incidents that happened there. And we were able to talk to the communities there. And fortunately, before we put physical security there, the police did their work, cleaned up the area, and now it's much safer to travel in that part of the country. So there's a lot of things that we're doing. Some of them we can't talk about because they are safety and security, and they have to be a little bit secret, that we're doing in that space of safety and security. Number 6, China-ready strategy. And we had started this process, I think, sometime in 2018, to start to have a discussion that if you're going to be attracting volumes of Chinese tourists, you got to be ready about it. I'm sure Andrew Kemp can speak to that, because if you walk around here, you see lots of Chinese tourists in Sunset and many other of their establishments. What is China-ready strategy? In simple terms, if you go to any place where there's large volume of Chinese tourists, you make sure that you cater from the payment system, because they don't use the same credit cards as we use. They've got other methods of payment. You've got to be able to use your phone, this and the other. From our chefs, are they ready to cook those breakfasts that are going to be accommodative to the tourists that are coming here? Digital infrastructure, and it was spoken about here. Do we have fast enough internet for people to take picture and be able to upload it, or is it going to take forever to upload? So when you talk about the China-ready strategies, to look at, we want this large volume of tourists coming into our country. Are we ready? From infrastructure to us as the private sector to catering for their needs, are we ready? And the answer was no. That's why we started to discuss the China-ready strategy. And I believe we need to go back, because we have reaffirmed that this market is still very important, and we need to ensure that this market, we are able to garner a good number of tourists to come to South Africa. Number 7, we spoke about additional funds for tourism marketing. Okay, I did some numbers with Gillian. There's hardly any movement in terms of additional funds to South African tourism as an entity. Hardly. In fact, if you factor in inflation, we're going backwards. It's been around 1.3 billion rand, sometimes just under 1.3 billion rand for the past 4 years. So it hasn't been moving. So we are not funding destination marketing. And perhaps it's because we have not shown the return on investment. So there's more work for us to do in terms of getting more or additional funds for tourism marketing. The situation is even worse in municipalities. It's worse. In fact, let me start with the provinces. There are provinces that don't even have R1 million to market the country. So you have a situation where the human resources bill is going up in an entity, and then you have the marketing expenditure going down. So we pay more salaries, but we do less marketing. So that has not been helpful. It has not been working. And I'm sure it's the same with infrastructure. Infrastructure is going down, HR bill is going up. So we have a problem in the provinces. There are provinces that were not adding down. Yet they've got a full functioning tourism authority. And then you ask yourself a question, then what do the people who are sitting there do? Because there is no budget. So that's something that we need to confront head on. Because if the provinces are not doing what they're supposed to do, how are we going to drive domestic tourism? How are we going to drive international tourism? How are we going to make sure that the new experiences are featured in the global stage? It's not going to happen. Municipalities is even worse. You go to the metros, there's not even 1 rand to do anything. I know of people that travel using their own money to even go to Indal. Our own show. Why? Because there's no money. So there is this situation of additional or funding of tourism in all spheres of government is important because the return on investment is far too large and it can't be ignored. And it permeates through, everyone in the community if we do it right. We talk about, I'm going to skip number 8, let me go to number 9. Issues of air access. And I'm happy that the previous panel discussion spoke of air access, and others also spoke a bit about air access. It goes hand in hand with marketing. If you're not generating demand, the airlines are not going to put aircrafts. So there has to be some seed funding to make sure that through marketing, to make sure that there's demand, and when there's demand, airlines are able to say, something is happening in South Africa, we need to take advantage of it. So if you don't have marketing funds, airlines are not going to come, everything becomes concentrated, it's a bottleneck, we go nowhere. So very important that when we talk about air access, we put money behind it. So let me talk about a little bit of what we've done. Through of our fund that we call the Collaborative Fund, we have managed to seed fund 3 air access initiatives. We've seed funded the Cape Town air access when it started. I think we put in 2 million rand then. We also funded the Gauteng air access to get more flights to come into Gauteng area. And last year, or early this year, we funded the Durban Direct air access to get more airlines to fly to Durban. We'll report more on that next year, whether they've done what they said they were going to do and how many airlines are going to those particular areas. But from the private sector point of view, we've kept our word and we've funded those 3 initiatives. Yes, we are looking at the national initiative. How do we coordinate these 3 structures? And also bring in the smaller areas, smaller airports, likes of Hoedspruit, KMI, and many others that may need to be connected, whether it's in PE or East London. How do we make sure that we've got good frequencies in between? Because if we don't have good frequencies, we're not going to address the issue of geographical spread. People will go where there's air access. Investment incentives. I'm glad that we had the G20 investment summit. But one of the things that we said is important is that other sectors have the industrial development zones, and then they get tax breaks. And when they get tax breaks, they're able to start up and do stuff. Like automotive sector has that. You've got all these industrial zones that are being built in various parts of this country for different sectors. But we also want to have tax breaks if we're going to build a hotel or if we're going to have an attraction. So what we're saying there is that there has to be incentives that are directed to tourism. The same way you've got automotive incentives, we want tourism incentives. So that, I think, is something that we need to keep pushing. But all of this can only be done if we have a good public-private partnership to improve our marketing and to implement things that we said we're going to do. That is key, and we spoke about this yesterday. If we want to succeed as a destination, we've got to work together. The public-private partnership is critical, not one-sided. I'm happy that the minister spoke this morning and said, we need to plan Indaba together and Meetings Africa together. She didn't say that one must go and plan and inform the other. So that's what needs to happen. We've always been talking about planning from inception. The private sector is the one that does the trading. And the people that are sitting in this room are the ones that know what will work and what will not work. And therefore, those that are sitting here should be the one that says this works and this doesn't work. The government's job is to enable. So that's going to be very important. And it applies in marketing, it applies in all other things that we need to do. The most important thing, before I finish, is that we need to trust each other. The trust deficit lately is not good. It's not good. And it's not beneficial to anyone. So, no, it's someone outside. So, as I conclude, I think what's very important, a trusting partnership is very important. You can never have marriage without trust, or a relationship without trust, whether it's a business relationship or otherwise. There has to be trust. The deficit that exists needs to narrow. And we need to find ways of making sure that is narrowed. Because when we do this work, we do it for everybody else that's not in this room. Because we are here to take this information and take it back to those that are on the ground. So we need to make sure that we narrow the gap, in terms of the trust. So none of this can happen if we don't trust each other, if we don't work with each other, if we second guess each other, if we don't respect each other. It's not going to work. So that's where we are on that. 4 years. I thought I should report back on that. Yesterday, we had a marketing workshop. And part of having this marketing workshop was to talk about initiatives that we're going to do as a private sector. And I'm going to run through that quickly because some of you were there. Why are we doing these initiatives as a private sector? Is because there is a gap. And we're not going to allow that gap to widen and do nothing about it. So we have agreed on the following. This is from the board of TBCSA and the board of TOMSA, to say that if there are things that the industry feels that they are important and they are not being done by those that are supposed to do them, we're going to do them. So we have agreed that on the space in the MySpace, that there are certain platforms that are international platforms that are critical, that we need to be there. Otherwise, if we don't go there, South Africa is not present. So we have agreed that we're going to go to IMEX in Las Vegas. And we have put some money down to subsidize those that are able to go there to be able to go there. We have agreed that we're going to go to IBTM in Berlin. Is it in Berlin or is it in Barcelona? We're going to go to Barcelona. If those that are supposed to go there are unable to go there, we will go there. So we've agreed on that. We have agreed that we will do the golf. It's a golf show, but we're a little bit too late. So we're not going to be able to pull it together, so we're going to leave it and we're going to figure it out for next year. We also have agreed that we're going to do initiatives that have to do with domestic marketing. As and when we are ready with the projects, and we believe that the projects are good and sound, we're going to do them, if those that are supposed to do them are not doing them. We also agreed that we're going to do international campaigns. If those that are supposed to do it are not doing them, we're going to go to the markets and do what we're supposed to do. Now, we don't have a lot of money. I know a lot of people have been talking about figures. The amount of money that we have is around 150 million. So we're going to use that 150 million to do what we can as a private sector to make sure that the industry don't suffer. That's what we're going to do. And we have started. It's not a secret. It won't be a secret. We cannot allow the gaps to widen without doing anything about it. And I'm just a messenger. I'm carrying the message from the board. And I spoke to my chair of TBCSA and the chair of TOMSA. We have met, the boards have met, we have agreed that we're going to do these things. And we've started doing them because we don't want the industry to suffer. When we can't sit back as leaders, and put our hands behind our back and say, hey, there's nothing we can do. There is something we can do. There is something we are doing, and we are going to continue doing those things. So those are the things that we're going to be embarking on. There will be more. And as and when we've made a decision, and as and when we've put those things up and we agree on the project, we will fund them, we'll execute for the benefit of the industry. That's very important. I think I've said a mouthful. I've spoken about what we are up to. This slide is going to be there until we are done, because this is not going to be a talk shop. We have to account. And when we account and we are persistent, we get results. And some of the results, you saw them today when the ministers were presenting in terms of the interventions that we've seen. As for us, as a TBCSA, our main job is to lobby, to advocate. Sometimes we're going to fight with people, but our job is to get the results for the industry, and we're going to continue to do that. Thank you.